Hey, what's up guys? Garden here, coming guys with a deck profile update on my Narukami Vermillion deck. Yeah, it's been a good while for this deck on the channel. I think since set 11 basically was when the last time I profiled this. But yeah, the deck is surprisingly really fun to play right now. It got a promo card which helped with its multi-attack problem with the binding issue if your opponent has no rear guards. But it also got some pretty nice indirect support, which kind of helps it with its own strategy. So yeah, without further ado, we'll go into the deck. So for the ride line, we do have the new Energy Crest, which we got recently from the new trial decks. We are still waiting for Divine Set 1 to come out at the moment. That's kind of when I'm profiling this. But I don't think there's going to be anything too substantial for the deck initially. Not even like the Energy Blast stuff, I don't think, because the issue I kind of have with the deck right now is that, well, less of an issue. The deck's kind of in a good place in terms of what I'm using, because everything in this deck kind of has a reason for being here, and also, the deck's kind of like packed now to the point where every piece is kind of important. So unless we get any like major substantial support later down the line, we'll have to see. But until then, I'm pretty happy with how the deck's made. So yeah, to go through the ride line, of course, we have, of course, Spark Kid for the starter, Red River for the grade 1, Thunderstorm for grade 2, and Vermilion for grade 3. Red River's going to search the order card when you ride on top of it, being the Eternal Thunderbolt. And yeah, Thunderstorm is going to search top 7 for a Narukami or the order card, essentially, to add to hand. So the cool thing with that is that we could use that to get to Persona rides if we don't have them, or important pieces like the Rising Phoenix or something. So yeah, top 7 is pretty reliable. And of course we have Vermilion, which will go over his skills as we go into the min deck, since of course we do have the Persona Ride copies, an extra 3 copies of Vermilion. So Vermilion is pretty neat. He's a CB1 to give 2 of your Narukami's 5k. So of course he can give 5k to himself. Maybe 5k to like a Phoenix or a booster or something, or a Thunderstorm. Uh, yeah, it's okay, but the main part of it is that when he attacks, you get to select 2 rearguard circles, and you get to attack the units that are on those circles, as well as the opponent's Vanguard. So pretty much like the original Vermilion, he gets to attack 3 things. But the cool thing with this is that we do have a way to turn that into an attack extension, either through the order and binding stuff. But we are less reliably so focused on that, because we do have a way to self-bind now, which is the main thing that this deck needed in order to get Phoenix to come back during the battle phase. But yeah, the second skill that Vermilion has is at the end of the battle he attacks. As long as you play the normal order and your opponent has 4 or less damage in their damage zone, you can discard a card from your hand and deal a damage to your opponent's Vanguard. So it sounds a little bit iffy because you do have to discard one, but you do get a damage out. So it's kind of like you're critting them in a way that they can't avoid. So that's kind of neat. But yeah, this deck essentially, with the way it plays, you kind of want to like hit face as fast as possible, even as early as turn 1. And there is ways of doing that. So yeah. So we'll get into the next grade 3, which of course going to be 4 copies of, whoops, sorry for hitting the camera there. 4 copies of the Eternal Thunderbolt. The card's okay, but it's the main function of the card that allows the deck to play as it does. So when you play this, you can either play it normally, or you can play it by binding it from your drop zone. So this makes for a really good discard target for not only your right deck, but also Vermilion's discard effect. So pretty good. You're of course going to be searching one of these guaranteed through your Red River, so that's fine, but the extra copies come in handy just so that you have that constant flow to be able to activate it every turn that you need it. And also having that ability to bind itself is also pretty good for Phoenix to resurrect, since you can actually abuse Phoenix to the point where you're like retiring himself to give more of your units 5k power so that they can help get over defensives, whilst also like setting him back up in the drop zone to then call out later during the battle phase, essentially. But we'll go more into that later on. But the red text skills that you get from the order on Vermilion is essentially when Vermillion kills a rearguard, it gets bound instead of being retired. And then also, if your opponent has no rearguards on their board, your front row rearguards get 5k. So those are the two skills that you get. Quite low impact, but you know, binding can be quite annoying for any like recursion decks that get stuff back from the drop zone. And also the extra 5k, although it doesn't come up a whole lot, but it can become available to you if your opponent's board's set up in a way to where Vermillion can like kill the rear guard so that you can gain access to the 5k power, or if you're against a deck that just doesn't have a board most of the time when they pass the turnover. So that's just a free 5k for you, which can help you a lot when it comes to generating your numbers, essentially. So yeah, that's it for the order card. So the main part of the deck that's going to allow us to get the multi-attacks now is the Rotger Hammer Dragon. So this card's pretty sick. When it attacks, if you played a normal order, he gets 5k. And at the end of that battle, you can counterblast, draw a card, and then bind this unit. Amazing card. This not only enables Phoenix to come back from the drop zone, but it opens the circle up, which means you don't have to like overcall the Phoenix on top of something. And then also this card draws you a card as well. Like, it literally does everything the deck needed. The extra 5k is nice as well, because if you can give this 5k through other effects, it'll be swinging for 23, 28, maybe 33, 38 first, which is a pretty big swing, to be fair. And more times than often will just help accelerate your opponent damage count, but just low enough so that you can still use Vermillion's effect to then push them to 5. So yeah. But the second effect on this is that if it's in the bind zone, as long as you played a normal order and you have a Vermillion Vanguard that's Narukami, blah blah blah, as long as you don't control another copy of this card on the rearguard circle, you can call him from the bind back to rear, which is amazing. So as long as you have one of these in rotation, you're always going to have access to it and your multi-attack. So that's fantastic. So the main source of our CB is going to this. Sometimes we will use it for the counterblast on Vermillion to clear the opponent's board, get the extra 5k. Just getting the 5k though, not particularly worth it. So we're only really going to be doing it when we actually know that we're attacking rear guards. But besides from that though, the order is pretty much going to make it so that we get some sort of value regardless. Either we're going to bind some rear guards with Vermillion, or we're going to get free 5k power basically to make things harder to guard. So yeah, so that said, we have the grade 3s there, and we'll have the grade 2s coming up next. So for the grade 2s, we have 4 copies of Latifa. So this one basically allows us to check the top 5, as long as you played an order this turn, to look at top 5, choose a unit with equal low grade to the van. If it's a unit, you gotta call it. If it's an order, you add it to hand. So yeah, even if we don't find a unit that we want, we can at least add the order if we need that, or just to get out of the deck and then get it into rotation, get it into the drop zone, start binding it, yada yada. The main purpose of this though is so that we can filter to our Hammer Dragon, because we really need to see this. And unfortunately, he is not an Arakami. He is a Dragon Empire card. He is a modern card, you know, he's a D card. So we do need to get to it. It's as consistently as possible, as well as a lot of other pieces in the deck as well. So even if you do have the Hammer Dragon, this is also going to help you with finding other stuff in the deck that you will need as well. So yeah. So with that said, we do also have 3 copies of the Thunderstorm Dragoon. So Thunderstorm is essentially going to give us a soul charge when you place it on the rear, and he also gets 5k power, so he gets a little bit of a power boost, and naturally, this is going to give us a bit of early game, because we can call this down as early as grade 2 and get some pretty good swings out there. So yeah, but we do need the soul charge in the deck, because the Phoenix does soul blast for its skill to call itself back out, and we're going to be doing that a lot in the game. So yeah, and also the Latifa soul blast as well. So soul blast is a pretty important resource. All right. So with that being said, we have the grade 1s, which fundamentally is actually the most important part of the deck, I would say. We have 4 copies of Rising Phoenix. So Of course, this is the main attack extender of the deck. Naturally, we're going to be using Rocket Hammer Dragon, bind it, call the Phoenix back, get that extra attack out. Now, you may notice a problem with Phoenix. It's pretty weak. It's a grade 1. But this is fine, though. We have ways to deal with that. But one thing you should know is that you can actually rush with these in the early game, because since you are going to be resurrecting them anyway, late game, you can call them down to rear and start smacking face, like, instantly. And if you also see this card, you'll understand why. We're playing 4 copies of Static Crack Dragon. So, Static Crack is pretty cool. Essentially, whenever a unit is placed in the same column as him, that unit gets an extra 5k. So, yeah, it has to be Reguard Circle, so no Vanguard shenanigans, but yeah, the main thing with this is that when we're calling the Phoenixes back from the drop, we're basically turning this into like a 21k column. Persona Rider will make that into 31. Now you may think 31, 21, kind of awkward numbers. It's actually pretty good if you go first, because your opponent's going to be like, you know, grade 1 at 8k base, grade 2 10k base. So going first is pretty good. But when you are going second, you do want to try find some way to get some extra power. And this is where Phoenix comes in again, because we can actually call the Phoenix back by binding our order from the drop zone, resurrect it, and then give this 5k through Phoenix's own retire skill. So yeah, that will then bump the column up to 26, 36, which is much better, just in case the opponent gets like 1 or 2 defensives. So at least then that column can still hit. And then the really funny part with this is that it's kind of a shame we don't have an extra 2k power, am I right? Because, you know, 31 into 33, 36 into 38. Well, yeah, we do have the skill crits. So it's pretty funny because, yeah, that 2k power does help us turn this into, like, magic numbers. But then also this is a way to generate soul as well. So we can actually put that to use for the Phoenix. So effect crit is actually pretty damn good in here, so would definitely recommend playing those in here. But either way, we do have some more grade 1s. We are not done. We are playing 4 copies of another promo card, being the Shenri. So this card came out of the Triple Drive booster, and it's really damn good for this deck. So it says, when it boosts, if your opponent has 1 or less rears, or if you've played an order this turn, she gets 5k until the end of the battle. And then at the end of that battle, you can pay the cost of putting it into the soul to then draw a card. This card is cracked. Not static cracked. I'm sorry. But yeah, this card is incredible. It's soul, which the deck needs. It's refilling hand, which it definitely needed before, and it's got it now. It's an incredible booster. 13k. It's going to help us make those perfect magic number Reguard columns. And yeah, if you remember Latifah, you know, she can get to 20k on her own, because she can basically get an extra 5 for every open rear that your opponent has in the same column as her. Kind of forgot to go over this, but I'll mention it now. But yeah, she synergizes perfectly with Vermillion, because the Vermillion can obviously clear the column up. So she can get 20k, and then with a booster like this, you're looking at like 33 without Persona. Like, hello. Yeah, so the extra power and utility that this gives is incredible. And just like drawing the card as well is perfect for this, with it being like very piece reliant. It just helps us draw, see things that we need, gives us the resource with the soul. The card's perfect. Like, definitely play this. And then the final grade 1, of course, well, final grade 1s technically, is 3 copies of the PG and 1 of our Elementaria. So, yeah. So a lot of grade 1s, but they're actually all pretty good and pretty needed for the deck. So with that, we do have the triggers, finally. So of course we're playing the 1 over trigger, sticking to the Dragon Empire one. Fun interaction with this, with Vermillion, is that although both his skills are once per turn, so you can't use the second skill twice, the first skill, as long as you've activated it once, he will be able to target new rearguard circles when he's attacking, to then attack into those as well. So that is an extra benefit to Vermillion, is that if you see the over trigger and your opponent has like a full board, you're gonna be able to kill 4 of their rearguards normally with a Vanguard swing, which is pretty funny. But yeah, Dragon Empire OT, pretty good. Then, of course, we're playing 4 of the effect crit, which, why wouldn't we? I already explained why this is good in the deck. 2k is relevant, Soul's relevant, and yeah. But I am only doing 7 crit. And the reason for this is because I prioritize draws so much more in this deck. Because we not only need to see pieces, but we also want fuel for Vermillion's discard effect. Because with that, we are pretty much like guaranteed a critical, if that makes sense. Like, by discarding that card, you are essentially critting them that they can't avoid. So I feel like that's a bit better than going for like the 8 crit. Although I would understand if you want to do 8 crit, because that makes the early game a bit more pressurizing as well if you rip one. But again, I feel like draw is a bit more important for this with the amount of pieces that we need to like set up on the board. I'm going for draws. So yeah. And then the final trigger, of course, is the 4 heals, which just went for this one from set 6, which looks nice. And yeah, you can play effect ones if you want to, like I always say, but it is what it is. But yeah, that's it for the deck. So Vermillion, it's pretty fun, honestly. I've had an absolute blast with this deck. It really reminds me of when Ezel got its promo and also some side support to make itself better. And yeah, that's kind of how this deck feels. It kind of just feels like it flows a lot better, and it's just more enjoyable to play. Like, to find all of these like different pieces that you need to like set your board up, it's really fun. And like micromanaging the power with Phoenix, and how you're like binding things in a way to like get certain effects off and lining things up properly. It's really fun. And yeah, the early game this deck does is incredible sometimes. Like, you can just push them to like 4 to 5 damage. And yeah, even though you only do 4 attacks in this deck, as soon as you get them to 5, you know, that's they're cooked. You know, they have to block everything now. So yeah. And the numbers this deck can generate can get really big sometimes. So yeah, that's also pretty cool. But yeah, that's it for the deck profile. That's it for Vermillion. So he is back for now. But who knows? Maybe we'll see some Divine support later in the future. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. So that's it for me. Hope you guys enjoyed. And I'll catch you guys in the next video. This is Guardian, signing out.